basis is going to keep your blood glucose and your serum insulin levels chronically elevated.
Yeah.
Not only is that going to lead to inflammation, but it's going to lead to immune confusion. And indeed, we have epidemics of autoimmune conditions where people's bodies, their immune system, are actually attacking part of their own body.
Yeah.
It used to be almost unheard of, not because we didn't know what it was, but because it just didn't used to happen 50, 60, 70 years ago at the rate that it's currently happening. I think another big driving force to this is the industrial vegetable oils that are super high in omega-6s. And their ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is not proper for human ingestion. They are cheap, they're easy to make. You can make a huge markup, a huge profit if you make these things. You can actually make any shelf-stable processed food from them. It'll stay on the shelf and look brand new 3 years from now, but it's not real human food. That's the problem. It leads to chronic, inappropriate inflammation. It leads to obesity and all the other things that we're talking about.
Welcome to the Mark Iron Method. This is episode 6 and we're speaking to Dr. Ken Berry, board certified MD with all those letters after his name. Super smart dude, but such a great guy, salt of the earth. Now you can catch him here on Wednesdays during his live presentations, and I always catch it. It's just packed full of great advice and information. It's also streamed on Facebook. And Dr. Ken shares openly in this candid interview about lies my doctor told me, all about his book. When he went through medical school, he found that he was taught a certain way, calories in, calories out, all that kind of dogma, but it didn't work. He eventually became fat and tired and inflamed. And the same is true for me. When I did my personal training course, that's what I was taught. And the same thing happened to me, but we'll show you the problem and give you all the steps towards the end. And I call that the Mark Iron wrap-up. Now, before we move on, check the show notes so you can go to specific places in this podcast here on YouTube, or whether you're watching it on Apple or Spotify or all those platforms. You can check out the podcast notes and just go, well, I want to skip to here and just go straight to that. And that's a really cool thing. So I encourage you to do that. And what Ken's also going to talk about is towards the end is what he called the Roman Emperor diet. And I wholeheartedly agreed. It's kind of like we're kept down by this inflammation. We're tired. We're not motivated. We don't want to take life on. We're being deprived of energy and hormones and feeling alive. And what he speaks about is moving towards these A and B grade foods and away from these F and C grade foods, if you understand what I'm talking about. But these two gentlemen here, the guy on the right there can fix this. But right now he's inflamed, full of stress hormones. Like, I think deep down in your heart of hearts that if we have stress hormones and inflammation, we just don't feel good. We don't have energy. We're not motivated. But if you are like this gentleman on the right and have finally got the right information from people like Dr. Ken, we can take life on, and that's what it's all about. Feeling alive, feeling motivated. So this is the Mark Iron Method. This is episode 6. We are speaking to Dr. Ken Berry, board certified MD. So let's check it out.
If you can just talk a little bit about why you wrote the book, and that was the theme of the book, so our listeners can understand that they've got a second choice that they can make.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are many ways in which traditional Western medicine is the most advanced and the best choice in the world. If you are hit by a bus, or if you have acute appendicitis, or if you have an acute myocardial infarction, you need to be in a center that practices modern Western medicine, right? The place where I think that modern Western medicine, and indeed modern medicine worldwide, got it wrong and still gets it wrong on a daily basis, is kind of the bedrock or the foundation of optimal health. So, and I consider that to be nutrition. And nutrition and lifestyle. Those are really the two bedrock things that you build either good health or less than optimal health. And so much of Western medicine, we're so busy learning about the latest FDA approved pill or injection or treatment, that we never really stop to think, well, what about the foundation, right? We're up here, we're almost up in the rafters dealing with the minutia and completely ignoring the crumbling foundation of Western health. I mean, if you look at the population of the United States, over 80% of adults have at least one marker of metabolic syndrome. So it is now more normal in the United States to be metabolically unhealthy than it is to be healthy. That is truly the new normal in the United States. And that sort of thing that's why I wrote the book. And that's why I've always been a bit of a contrarian in my thinking. My favorite word from the time I could speak was why, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you ask that question too many times of an expert, you'll quickly come to the end of their intellectual rope, and they'll be done talking to you. And because they don't know why. Ultimately, when you get back down to the foundational level, they have no idea why they're saying what they're saying. They're just basically repeating parrot-like what they were taught in their medical school training and their residency training. And that's what you're getting, is basically an educated, well-paid parrot to repeat and regurgitate. You're not getting somebody who's thinking about each question that you ask at a foundational level.
Yeah, absolutely. I like in your book, and I also heard you interview Mike Muntz, and you talked about way back in the day where a young doctor found out that if he just washed his hands, he could save lives. So if you just talk a little bit about that, I guess, have a paradigm shift in mindset that, we have to be questioning why, as you just articulated. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So this is Dr. Semmelweis that we're talking about, and he actually figured this out before the germ theory of infectious disease was even known. We didn't know about bacteria and viruses and funguses. We didn't know about any of that. All that stuff was still invisible to us and therefore unknown to us. But he found out. And so basically what would happen in the wealthy hospital is that the professors would take all the medical students to the cadaver lab, and they would dissect dead bodies, and they would teach. And that's good. You should do that, right? You have to have cadavers to learn anatomy.
Yeah.
But they would do this with bare hands, and they would never wash their hands when they were finished. And they might scrape off the larger bits, but they in no way tried to cleanse or sanitize their hands, because doctors were considered gentlemen. And even to suggest that a gentleman was unclean was the height. I mean, that could wind up in a duel, right? Or definitely wouldn't get invited to the next social gathering. And so Semmelweis was a young doctor. And in medicine, as in most institutionalized things, the young guys, basically their job is to shut up and listen and to memorize and regurgitate. That's a young doctor's job. And so Semmelweis found that he saw that this weird thing, that in the wealthy hospital, the incidence of childbirth fever, where the mom would die from infection, was much higher in kind of the high society hospital than it was in the hospital where prostitutes and people like that would go to have their babies. And that's because there was no cadaver teaching at the charity hospital, right?
Right.
And he thought, I wonder if it has something to do with us mucking around in mortifying bodies and then going straight to labor and delivery and delivering babies. I wonder if that has anything to do with it. So he started washing his hands in this carbolic solution. It wasn't really any kind of antiseptic we would think of today. Immediately he noticed a decrease in childbirth fever in the moms. And so he actually did control research, and he wrote up his findings just as we're supposed to do, right? He did meaningful research, and he actually had it published, but he was a young doctor. And in medical school and residency, you're judged by the length of your white coat. And so a medical student has a waistcoat, right? And then a resident has a coat that hits about mid-thigh. And then some of the attending physicians or the professors, when they walk in a room, their white coat looks like Princess Diana's train when she was walking up to be married. And so he was basically calling out all these older, well-established professors, saying, hey, you guys have been killing women for years by not washing your hands. It's very simple. All you have to do is wash your hands. So you would think that immediately these doctors would say, oh my God, I've never thought of that. I don't know why it works because we don't know about germs, but I'm going to give it a try. Well, that's not what happened.
Right.
Semmelweis was basically ran completely out of practicing medicine. He was ran out of his country, and he wound up in a mental institution.
Wow.
And where the orderlies on the intake, they beat him so unmercifully that he got an infection, and he died probably from one of the same germs that he was trying to save all of the women from. He died of that infection in the insane asylum, and he was right the whole time. And now we take it as evidence. You have to wash your hands before you ever touch any patient. Yeah. But at that time, that was considered he was just a young buck with a big mouth, and he was trying to make a name for himself, and they ran him out of medicine. And so I think that's knowing that story and understanding that story. We all identify with Semmelweis, but what many doctors should understand is that they are the doctors that ran Semmelweis to insanity. They are that doctor. They're not Semmelweis. They're the other guy. They're the bad guy in this story. Many of the people at the Harvard School of Public Health, at Harvard Medical School, they are the doctor that would have put Semmelweis in the insane asylum. That's who they are. And I think once they start to come to grips with that, they'll change the way they practice medicine and change the way they train young doctors. But until then, we're kind of stuck in our current paradigm, and it's not great for patients.
No, it's not. That's kind of what happened to me in 2017 October. But I noticed that you also wrote in your book that there's two kinds of doctors too. One that will just say, this is it, it's this way or the highway. Or the other doctor will say, give me a look at that research paper, and this is interesting. I want to move forward with this. Is that how you kind of approach it too?
Yeah, that's always. And I would have, all doctors have patients that make odd requests. Yeah. And I decided early in my career, unless their request is obviously going to do harm to them or to me or my staff, why not? Why not? Yeah. If I don't have any research against it, why would I oppose it? And so I would have people who would want this certain test checked or that test, and I was always happy to oblige that, as long as they understood that insurance might not cover it. They may have to write a check. But many doctors are immediately offended if you bring in paperwork that you've printed off the internet, or if you ask for some test they don't routinely order. They're immediately defensive, and they're immediately emotional. And in my book, that's a big red flag that you really don't have a partner-like relationship with that doctor. That doctor considers you, a minor in this relationship. You're a child and they're the adult, and you need to shut up and do what mommy or daddy says. Yeah. And I don't think that's how medicine should be practiced. I think that there are doctors out there who are willing to look at everything with open eyes, but they're in the minority, and it shouldn't be that way. Doctors are supposed to be teachers, and to be a good teacher, you have to be a good student. Yeah. And many doctors are not good students at all. After a certain point in their training, they think that they know everything, and it's just not. It's not the case.
Yeah, especially I think with nutrition, as you mentioned in your book, the basic training you got from nutrition was just a little tiny, a few pages in a book, but you were basically told that it's carbs, exercise, and low fat. So what's your take on that now? Where does that drive into your teaching now?
Yeah, well, all that's exactly wrong. And so when it comes to providing nutrition for someone who's severely injured and they're in the burn unit or they're in the intensive care unit and they're intubated and unconscious, we got a great education on how to provide nutrition to them until they could eat again. But the nutrition education that we are severely lacking in is, how do you feed just a normal man or woman who's in their 30s or 40s or 50s? What should be their proper diet that gives them optimal health? And that's where medical science and nutrition science completely drops the ball. They have no idea. Basically, they're practicing on what is the latest fad diet, which is low fat, lots of whole grains, and lots of fruits and veg. That's just the latest fad that's been around for the last 50 or 60 years. It's based on no meaningful research whatsoever. And I would opine that it's also wrong. Yeah.
That's, well, I was trained as a personal trainer as well, and that's what I was told. Lots of carbs, low fat, and lots of exercise will get you the results. But unfortunately, it didn't get me the results. As a personal trainer, I eventually reached out to a professional bodybuilder who got me the results, and it was the complete opposite of what I was taught as a personal trainer. So it was a big eye opener for me then. So I guess, what we have to do is really think about what hasn't worked in the past and be open to the idea to move in and up in the opposite direction of what might work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's ample evidence to see how this experiment in human nutrition has went over the last 60 years. 70 years ago, the average American was not overweight. They were not pre-diabetic. They did not have fatty liver. And now, after 60 years of this latest nutrition fad of low fat and lots of whole grains and lots of fruits, 80% of us are metabolically unwell. So obviously, that ain't working that well. We should probably reassess that.
Yeah. So I guess inflammation is a big driver into that as well. Like if you got constant high glucose, that's just going to cause AGEs and a lot of inflammation. And I've looked at the research, and when we have an inflamed body, the brain goes into a state of avoidance and alarm. Now, to me, that makes perfect sense. You're tired, you want to go home, you've had enough, and this inflammation is driving bad moods, bad character traits, and we blame ourselves where, in fact, it's this inflammation driving this, fueling this in us. So I guess, how can we move away from that? Would we look at the endocrine system? What's your take on it? What about ketosis?
The two systems that we need to look at much closer than we currently have is the endocrine system and the immune system. Those are the two systems that really don't get much respect. And usually it's the nerdiest of doctors who go into those fields.
Yeah.
But it's also the most how do I want to say this? They're the most strict, and they're all about convention, and they're all about being proper, and they're all about going along to get along. And so they're never really. I don't think we're going to have a revolution come out of the endocrinology society. I don't think that's where it's going to come from, or the immunology society. That's not where it's going to come from.
Yeah.
Those guys are too busy trying to impress their colleagues by doing 1/10 of 1% better. Does that make sense? And what we need is a paradigm shift. We don't need to do 1/10 of 1% better. We need to completely tear down this old structure and rebuild it in such a way that people are actually metabolically healthy, where people are on the average person is not chronically inflamed. The average person is not metabolically unhealthy. That's what we need. That needs to be the goal. And currently we're failing at that miserably. Chronic, inappropriate inflammation is a huge malady in modern society. Eating too many carbohydrates on a daily basis is going to keep your blood glucose and your serum insulin levels chronically elevated. Not only is that going to lead to inflammation, but it's going to lead to immune confusion. And indeed, we have epidemics of autoimmune conditions where people's bodies, their immune system, are actually attacking part of their own body. Used to be almost unheard of, not because we didn't know what it was, but because it just didn't used to happen 50, 60, 70 years ago at the rate that it's currently happening. I think another big driving force to this is the industrial vegetable oils that are super high in omega-6s. Their ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is not proper for human ingestion. They are cheap. They're easy to make. You can make a huge markup, a huge profit if you make these things. You can actually make any shelf-stable processed food from them. It'll stay on the shelf and look brand new 3 years from now, but it's not real human food. That's the problem. It leads to chronic, inappropriate inflammation. It leads to obesity and all the other things that we're talking about.
I've found out that inflammation drives the worst. We go into alarm and avoidance, and then we go reaching for the same foods that are highly inflammatory. And the next day we wake up more inflamed. And as we get older and older, it gets worse and worse. More junk builds up in our cells, and it becomes a nightmare to try and move away from that, because we're overweight, we're inflamed, and we think that's just it. That we think this is how we are supposed to age. Is that how we're supposed to age?
No, not at all. And indeed, I think you've probably seen enough people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond in the keto community and the carnivore community no one in those communities acts their age. They,
No.
you know, a 50-year-old will look 40 and act 30.
Yeah.
And that's basically that's how human beings should be. Human beings are an apex species. I mean, we run this planet for a reason, because we are so advanced and have almost superhuman capabilities.
Yeah.
Unless you feed us an improper diet, and then we're
Right,
inflamed, we're lazy, we're depressed, we're obese, we're not really that super at all. But when you remove all of those slow poisons out of someone's diet and you start to feed them a proper human diet, all of a sudden this fat, lazy, depressed slob of a person starts to care about how they look. They start to learn new things. They start to improve their body, and it's almost as if it's natural for human beings to do those sorts of things. Actually it is natural, but it's just very rare these days because we're all so sick and inflamed. We're not in the mood to learn a new language or learn a new skill or build a new muscle. We don't care about that. We just want to lay down and take a nap because we feel miserable all day, every day.
Yeah. And I guess that's because we're just following mainstream nutritional advice, and we're not thinking that there's another way, or even experimenting and considering the idea that we can move in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you also have to always keep in mind that multi-million-dollar empires are going to fall if you and I have our way, right? If we are right, and if it does catch on, huge corporations are going to go bankrupt because no one is going to buy their inflammatory, diabetes-invoking diet. Nobody's going to eat that stuff anymore. And so obviously there's a quid pro quo in this. Like, I don't want these guys to be successful, even if they are right, because I'll lose my job. So you always have to consider the social aspect and the psychological aspect, as well as just the health and nutrition. I think Semmelweis is an excellent example. Just because you're right does not mean you will win. You in fact might lose, and lose quite painfully, but hopefully you've moved the needle enough that the next generation will pick up some of the things that you taught, and actually it'll become mainstream in the next generation.
It's an interesting idea to consider that if we kind of move our knowledge in that direction and our brains come back online, what the human race is actually capable of. I mean, that's that's got to be something that, you know, if your energy comes back online, the brain starts to work the way it was designed and evolved to. I actually heard Professor Wurtman from MIT said that our brain has evolved to increase in size and IQ as we age if we have trophic support, and that's all about the endocrine system.
Right.
So let's just talk quickly about endocrine disruptors and estrogen mimics. I noticed that you did an interview. I forget the name of the doctor, but he talked a lot about these estrogen mimics and whatnot. So if we can help the listeners start to understand that this is coming into your body and screwing up your endocrine system.
Yeah, basically every single thing in the human body, every physiological pathway is governed by hormones. Hormones run everything, and so a lot of the weight loss gurus will talk about calories in, calories out. If all you have to have is a calorie deficit, you're going to lose weight. And we're pretty much discovering that that's not the case at all. It's all about putting your hormones in the proper position. And so the doctor that I interviewed was Dr. Anthony J. He's a PhD researcher at the Mayo Clinic. And he wrote a book called Estrogeneration, which I highly recommend. Every human should read it, but definitely every male human should read that book, because there are in all of the packaging of every food that we eat, there are endocrine disruptors that are estrogen mimickers. And so it's not actually estrogen, but it fits in the estrogen receptor and therefore acts like an estrogen in the male and the female body. And having too much estrogen is not good for men, definitely, but it's also not good for women either. Both males and females need a certain amount of estrogen. That's normal, but to have molecules of plastic, and it's basically petroleum products that the plastic is made of, that disrupt your endocrine system. And I mean, you see this in men who have gynecomastia, who just they hold their fat in a female body distribution. They have no motivation. They can't build muscle even if they try. these are the products of everything being packaged in plastic. And yeah, I'm sure your listeners have heard a few years back, BPA became a buzzword. Oh, and so all the plastics immediately started saying, oh, we're BPA free.
Yeah.
The problem is that the BPS that's still in there and the phthalates and all these other things act just like the BPA. So really, they didn't change their product at all. It's still just as endocrine disrupting as it was before, but it's now BPA free, and that gives you a false sense of security when really your endocrine system is still being mucked with just as much now as it was before.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, just that one thing alone, if we're just mindful of these endocrine disruptors, anything plastic is just going to come into the system and turn you into an estrogenic person.
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely. And so really the key takeaway is you should never eat or drink anything that is in hot plastic or has been in hot plastic. And so never would I heat up a leftover meal in a Tupperware bowl. Never would I heat anything or drink anything out of styrofoam that's above room temperature. Now, it's perfectly fine and safe to freeze things in plastic wrap or Tupperware or some plastic container, because the temperature's so low, you're not leaching any of these things out of the plastic. But anytime the temperature of plastic is above room temperature, you're getting this influx of endocrine disruptors into your hormonal system, and the results are not good.
Right. Yeah, I didn't know that you could freeze with plastics. I just didn't touch plastics completely. But that's
well,
good.
Ideally, just don't have plastic in your house. But a lot of people, who are not well off, they've got all this plastic stuff, and that's what you can do with it. You can freeze stuff in it, and you can store stuff at room temperature, but you never heat the food in it, or you never put hot food into it. Only room temperature or lower should ever go into a plastic container.
Yeah, yeah. I've also heard that sea salt has microplastics in it too.
If it is an evaporated sea salt, which many of the artisanal salts are, they're like, oh, we evaporate our salt from this pristine little bay up in Washington State or whatever. The problem is that there was a study done, and 91% of all the commercial brands of evaporated seawater salts contain microplastics and nanoplastics. And with a nano-sized plastic, there is no filter that can filter that out. It's just in there. Yeah. And so all of the cheap salt that we eat has nanoplastics. There's no way around that. If it's evaporated seawater from the modern ocean, it has nanoplastics in it, which is an endocrine disruptor. And that's why I'm a big fan of Redmond's real salt. It comes from a mine deep under the ground in the United States. It's never been touched by the pollution of the modern ocean or the nanoplastics. And now, if you live in Asia or Europe, then maybe you should eat Himalayan sea salt, right? Because it's in a similarly protected position. But I like to eat local if I can. I'm all about, eating and living as local as you can. And for me, the local salt that I trust is Redmond's real salt from Utah.
Yeah. Sounds good. So that's another thing. Like if you're out having fast food, tipping salt on it, think about what's happening here. You're eating highly inflammatory food. Your omega-6 to 3 ratio is going up and up and up, more inflammation. Then you're tipping endocrine disruptors all over it. How can we possibly perform as a human when this is going on? We can't.
You can't. And that's exactly right. A human being is an impressive, stunning species if they're fed properly. But if they're fed improperly, we're a fat, lazy loser species.
Yeah, and we blame ourselves, right?
Yep.
We think it's us because we don't
That's
have this knowledge. Yeah.
Yep. All you need is the knowledge.
Yeah, that's it. And then we can make smarter choices. And then the brain and energy comes back online and we feel good because that is true. And then we start leaning out, which makes us feel better again. And then the brain links up that this lifestyle is awesome. So we continue with it. Yeah. So Dr. Ken, what about keto and carnivore? What's your thoughts there?
My thoughts on that are quite simple, actually. Human beings are a low carbohydrate species.
Yep.
We do best when we eat a very low carbohydrate diet. And so by definition, that's going to mean you're going to be eating lots of meat, right? And so you're well aware of the carnivore community. There's tens of thousands of people in the U.S. alone who eat exclusively meat or animal products. They never eat any kind of plant product at all. They usually look 10 to 15 years younger than their actual chronological age. They're usually quite muscular. They're very outgoing. They're very thoughtful, very creative, because they're actually getting all the nutrition that their body and their brain needs to function optimally. Now, human beings are omnivores. There's no doubt. We can eat plants and live for years, but that's not optimal. And so there's a reason that dictators and emperors and kings fed their slaves rice and beans and corn, because it's cheap and you don't starve to death, right? But now you're never going to be able to overthrow the emperor, because you're chronically malnourished. Your brain is chronically malnourished. And so it's easy to keep you down. It's easy to keep you working at your slave labor, and you don't have to worry about the slaves ever rising up, because they don't have the energy or the motivation to do that. It's only when you start feeding a human being lots of fatty meat, lots of eggs, lots of organ meat, that's when we start to get kind of intelligent and rowdy, and we kind of want to be left alone, and we kind of want to do our own thing, and we want to write our own books and write our own songs. We kind of become amazing. And so so many people in the world have bought the untrue story that eating a slave diet is the healthiest diet for a human being. Eating a plant-based diet, that's exactly the diet that the Roman emperors fed their subjects to keep them from revolting. That they had a full belly, they didn't starve to death, but they had no motivation. They had no mental inquisitiveness or ingenuity, and so they were easy to keep down.
Yeah, that is a profound insight for me. What you've just said there, because it makes perfect sense. Exactly what's happening this day and age. We're inflamed and our brain's not online. It's not working properly. We don't want to be creative. So, I mean, wow, that is just such a profound insight. I thank you for that, Ken. That's going to help our listeners try and position them over to from mainstream to the new science. That is fantastic. So with keto, what's your recommendations there? Do you just, you don't count calories, do you?
I never count calories. No. And just in case someone doesn't know, I used to be morbidly obese, and I used to be a pre-diabetic. Okay, so I was sick. I was that fat, sick doctor who used to try to tell patients how to lose weight. You can quickly see the incongruity of that. If you were my patient, you'd be like, "What the hell are you talking about? You need to do something for yourself." And so basically, the way I lost all the extra fat and reversed my type 2 diabetes, or my pre-diabetes, was to turn down my carbohydrate intake. And back then, I thought that keto was just a temporary hack. I didn't know that humans were by design a low carbohydrate animal. And so now I look back and I realize that's exactly why I lost the extra fat and put on muscle almost effortlessly, was because I was adjusting my diet to be more in line with the proper human diet. Keto, that's basically what keto does. And I think that you can do keto right if you're eating lots of seafood and mollusks and crustaceans, or you can do keto right if you're eating lots of fatty red meat. Either one of those is right, but I really think for a diet to be proper for a human being, there has to be a large component of meat, of animal products. That's how we evolved to have this huge brain that we have, is by eating lots of fat and lots of protein. And to say now that we should, only have what's the current guidelines, to have 2 ounces of meat a week or something? No, I'm not interested in being a slave, and I don't think most of your listeners are either.
No, that's exactly right. The recommendations are so juxtaposed to where I perform at my best. I put this all together working with a functional doctor back in early 2018, and everything came back online for me. Like, I had asthma, gone. I had arthritis, gone. I had allergies, rosacea. My blood pressure, ever since I was 19, was hypertensive. That's all normalized now. And because my brain came back online, and as I mentioned at the beginning of this, Professor Wurtman from MIT says that our brain has evolved to increase in size and IQ as we age when you get the diet right. I wrote a book myself in 2019 and had it published on Amazon. And I was told at school that I wasn't very smart and I should work with my hands, because I was following kind of the slave diet, I guess we can now call it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many people out there whose mind will never reach the level of creativity and complexity and just sublime beauty. They'll never reach that level because they're slowly poisoning their body and their brain every single day with the pseudo food that they're shoving in their face.
Yeah. And I find it just amazing to think if everybody started eating that way, what our world would become. I mean, that's profound. I mean, wow.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people who, we'll say their nest is well padded right now, they're not really interested in all of us at the bottom kind of waking up and saying, hey, I could actually be more productive and more thoughtful. Right. And then when somebody says something stupid on Fox News or CNN, I would immediately recognize it for what it is. It's just stupid. It's not true. There's no way that can be true. You probably have this. I seldom watch network television, but when I do, it's almost painful how idiotic it is. How it's just like it's on a fourth grade level. But the average person is so sick and inflamed and dumbed down by their diet that they'll sit and watch that, and then they'll go to work the next day and talk about it like it's important. And it's just asinine foolishness. But they don't realize it because their mind is crippled by the diet that they're told is healthy. That diet needs to change. All right, so slowly but surely.
Slowly, like your book and like Dominic D'Agostino talks about the keto diet. We've also got Dr. Rhonda Patrick. There's lots of people out there trying to inform and educate. And Dr. Ken, I am so grateful and appreciative that you spent the time to speak to me about this really important issue, because for me, it's given me my life back, and it's shown me that I am intelligent if I eat correctly. And I was told at school that I wasn't. But the science is there, the brain can grow, but you've got to feed it knowledge. You've got to stimulate that brain to move in that direction. But you've also got to have the building blocks of food and nutrition in place for that to occur, because if you don't have the building blocks, it's just like trying to build a house and there's no bricks. You can't build it.
Totally agree. You gotta feed your mind knowledge. But if you have not fed your brain all the fatty acids that it needs and all the minerals and vitamins that it needs, it can't do anything with that knowledge.
No, exactly. We've given a lot of valuable information to the listeners here today, and they can start to think about a paradigm shift in the direction of keto, carnivore, and start to make better choices.
Absolutely. And I hope that happens, because I don't ever foresee the American Diabetes Association holding a press conference and saying, you know what, we were completely wrong about diet. You should ignore everything we say. That's never going to happen. No. This change is going to come from the bottom up, from people like you and I and your listeners. That's who's going to change the world and save untold minds from being wasted. That's how this change is going to happen. And so I'm leaving it in your listeners' hands to share this when just like you're doing right now. You changed your life by changing your diet. Both your physical life and your mental life, you changed it. And so now you're sharing that with the world, and that's exactly what's got to happen. Every time somebody gets a benefit from keto or carnivore, they got to tell their neighbor, they got to tell their friends, they got to tell their family, hey, you're poisoning yourself. You got to stop.
That was Dr. Ken Berry, MD, board certified. Wow. I mean, damn, right? This is a Mark Iron Rack. We're going to dive into the steps that you can plug into your life to get this right. Pull down on all these levers so you can wake up in the morning when your feet at the floor, you've got energy. Your hormones are popping up. You've got everything you need. Here's what I did. I recorded this. Ken and I did this interview about a month ago. And I wanted to do some more research on those 3 steps and put it into a nice little easy to understand package that you can plug into your life, and that's what I've done. There should be information in the show notes, but I also experimented on this, okay? And the easiest way to show you is using a sleep app. I want to show you the difference between using the Emperor diet, okay, and how that affects your sleep, and the slave diet and how that affects your sleeps. So the first thing we have to do is check that out. But before we do that, I want to talk about genetics. Now, genetics are a massive lever that we can pull down on. If you've got garbage genetics like me, you can mimic them you can enhance them to become elite or good genetics, all right? I recently did a podcast with my friend and mentor, Dr. Anthony J, PhD, and that should be out in a couple of days from the release of this on here on YouTube. And it'll show you how garbage my genetics are. 4 things straight up. Number 1, I produce a lot of stress hormones much faster than the average person. I produce much more inflammation than the average person. And as far as staying lean and healthy, that shouldn't be the case for me, because Dr. Anthony said that we've got 3 genes: the FTO gene, fat transfer obesity gene, and the BBC interestingly did a documentary on this gene, because if you've got 2 pluses next to these 3 genes, you've got a 2.76 fold increase for the risk of obesity. And the 3 of mine have a plus next to it. But here's the thing, I'm close to 49 and I easily maintain a 10% body fat all year round. This isn't difficult to do. Those 3 steps are all you need. So I want to show you those 3 steps right here. And everything you need to know about Dr. Ken is below in the show notes, and the link to his book. I suggest that you grab it because it's a great book. And it shows you the problem that we're all faced with this slave diet. So the very first lever that we can indeed pull down on is to use the emperor diet. And there's, you don't have to count calories. This is not difficult to do. So let me just put on screen now my sleep app and show you exactly how this screws up your hormones, and it doesn't allow your body to create the resources it needs to kick ass. So what I did is, after we did this podcast, Dr. Ken and I put the slave diet to the test, and I know it's going to crush me, my hormones, my energy, my everything. So let's have a look at, as you can see on screen there, this is my sleep app. Now the previous night, Wednesday, lots of great sleep. Monday, same deal. We'll go back to Friday. You can see that my resting heart rate was nice and low, and I got 3 hours of deep restorative sleep. So that's what that looks like. Now, when you're in deep restorative sleep, your brain's lymphatic system opens up, and it does 2 pretty powerful things for you. First thing that it does, it cleans out your brain of inflammation, stress, toxic peptides, beta amyloids, tau plaques, all that gunk and mess. Then it starts to create hormones and neurotransmitters. You wake up the next day, you've got plenty of energy. When your feet hit the floor, it's like, yeah, this is going to be a great day, and it will be, because you've moved away from the slave diet. Now, on Friday night, I put the slave diet to the test. So I ate slave food, and as you can see, let me just show you this first. Even though I slept, I didn't get any deep sleep. Let me go back to the previous screen there, and as you can see, no deep sleep. And look at my heart rate, it's way up. I was in a stress response even though I was sleeping. So my brain didn't clean out the gunk, so I'm going to wake up tired and dull. And also my hormones are going to be tapped down because I was in a stress response, because this food is highly inflammatory. And the older you get, the worse it becomes. So that was just a little insight about what this food does. Like, we get used to it. We're born into this mess. And if you've got garbage genetics like me, as I just mentioned, it's exponentially worse still. So what I want to do now is show you where this food is and the other 2 levers that we can pull down on. So right there on screen is, it's in the food supply, and there's 5 big problems that we all face. And as Dr. Ken said, we have to have a paradigm shift and move away from this metabolic mess. So there's 2 problems: constant elevated blood glucose form. Okay, they create these things called AGEs, advanced glycation end products. You don't need to know anything about this, but it comes in 2 forms. Our body creates it because we have insulin resistance, and it's been said now that up to 80% of people on the planet have some form of insulin resistance. And interestingly, I'll show you the research paper very shortly, these estrogenic endocrine disrupting chemicals they cause insulin resistance as soon as they start coming in at too high of a degree for our genes to clean them out. So this is where genes come into play, and because I've got garbage genetics, I got a lot of this crap you see on screen here, right? I didn't develop atherosclerosis, but that's what these AGEs eventually will do. And this is the research is there. Oxidative stress, lipid peroxidization, proteins, this is just academic now. And it causes arthritis. 5 shoulder surgeries. I had arthritis, I don't anymore. Pulmonary disorders. Again, asthma. I had asthma. My pop died of an asthma attack when I was 16, and I saw that happen, and it's scary. And, that's one of the big reasons I'm here talking to you today, because in October 2017, I thought, like my pop, I was going to die of an asthma attack. That's how bad it got for me in 2017. But I moved from the slave diet to the emperor diet, and that reversed itself very quickly. Number 4, endocrine disorders. Exactly what we're talking about here. So this is just one form, right? Insulin resistance, AGEs. Remember, your body is doing this to you because we're eating the wrong foods, and these foods contain them, so it's a double whammy. Now, they're addictive. The scientists have now shown that they're addictive, and I guess the cereal companies, the big food companies, they know this. They know it's addictive, and that's why they're feeding it to us, to keep us down, to keep us dull. They don't want people being creative. They don't want us rising up and actually thinking for ourselves and being excited for life and creating new businesses. And once people start learning the truth about how addictive this crap is and how destructive it is over time, and depending on your genetics, like elite genetics, you're gonna do okay. Crap genetics like me, you're gonna have asthma, arthritis, you're gonna have joint pain, your brain's not gonna work, you're gonna be dulled, you're gonna be kept down. This is what's happening. So this research paper here up top, phytoestrogen content. So this is just estrogen-like in cereals. Okay, so we're feeding this to our kids, and we should be feeding this to our kids. And this research paper here, I was told by my friend Dr. Anthony that a lot of these scientists use the word may because they don't want to be sued by these big, massive, high-profit cereal companies and food companies. So they say dietary phytoestrogens may, right, be involved in the occurrence of chronic disease. Well, of course they are. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The second research paper you see there on screen. So we've got, in our brain, we've got these things called opioid receptors. Now, what's interesting is that wheat, the gluten in wheat, right? Gluten in wheat has these opioid peptides. They hit our opioid peptides in our brain. They become addictive. Milk, the same thing. So the casein in milk, spinach. Yeah, spinach has got this, and also soy. So what is also troubling about soy, if you get vegetable oil, which you shouldn't, as Dr. Ken talked about, 1/3 of it is soy. So that fried food that we get from, wherever, McDonald's, I don't know, wherever, it's addictive, right? So all this shit is addictive. We go and get our cappuccino, the milk in there is addictive. We have the bread, it's addictive. It's in that fat, vegetable oil, that's addictive, and we're just driven back to it, even though it doesn't taste that wonderful. It's just like, because we're dulled down, we're on autopilot, we're not thinking, we just go, oh, screw it, whatever. This is what we're doing. And we're born into this, but we can have that paradigm shift that I've had, that Dr. Ken's had, to move away from this addictive crap. Now, it gets worse, because these opioid peptide foods, they deplete our master antioxidant glutathione. This research paper here shows that. But it also disrupts a very important metabolite called SAMe. Now, you don't need to know any of this geeky stuff, all right? But SAMe helps you create neurotransmitters, hormones. It helps you burn fat. It turns genes on and off. It is extremely important. So glutathione is the master antioxidant, and it's down regulating this. So we eat this shit, and glutathione helps with inflammation and oxidative stress. So our stress goes up. It's a double whammy. It's a massive, massive problem. Now, 2 more research papers here. It ages us faster. Our skin, our cells, these AGEs, again, 2 forms, blood glucose because we have insulin resistance. And remember, these estrogenic endocrine disrupting chemicals cause cause insulin resistance. And I'll show you the research paper on that very shortly. But it's also in our food supply. So this research paper here, there is ample evidence that AGEs play an important role in skin aging. To hell with that. I don't want to eat food that ages me, do you? I mean, shit. And look at these other 5 points from the research paper. It causes inflammation, we already know that, but it toughens protein molecules, including joints. They become stiff and sore and inflexible. Does this sound familiar? This is what was happening to me. You wake up in the morning, you're kind of like, oh shit, I'm just, this is what's happening. Remember that I was talking about sleep, cleaning out the inflammation and all that crap, and restoring hormones and neurotransmitters. And point number 3 here, many metabolic pathways impaired, including hormones, because we know that they're endocrine disruptors. Screws up your cholesterol, point number 4. But point number 5, it slows synaptic connection. And, there's not much more that needs to be said there, I don't think. But another research paper, and this is the last one I think we need to see, activation of several inflammatory pathways, AGEs. Now remember, insulin resistance, you don't even know that you've got this. You've got no clue. And that's a big problem, because you've got these AGEs constantly causing inflammation and stress hormones to go up, which taps down thyroid function, growth hormone, our ability to burn fat and stay lean and healthy all year round. It crushes DHEA, testosterone, and all those things. Now, this is the holy grail of keeping your endocrine system functioning optimally. I'm going to go back to this, but you can see here that there's positive feedback loops that inhibit you from producing optimal levels of hormones, and there's inflammation, acute or chronic, will lower the amount of sex hormones, DHEA that you produce, drugs, see opioids here, and we just talked about the opioids in foods. So these foods are not only addictive and we want to go to them and they make us feel good temporarily, but they also hit the opioid receptors and lower the amount of DHEA, testosterone, and all those things. And these endocrine disrupting chemicals inhibit thyroid function, so your metabolism slows down. So you see all these layers here, that it's taking away your energy, it's taking away your feel-good hormones, it's taking away testosterone, DHEA, growth hormone. All these things are being inhibited because we're eating the slave diet. And it just to show you this research paper here, estrogenic-like endocrine disrupting chemicals, they really started taking off in the 80s. Now look at this research paper here. This is testosterone, right? So late 80s to the early noughties, see this massive drop. And my friend and mentor, Dr. Anthony J, talks about this in his book. Since the 40s, men's testosterone has dropped twofold. So what's really going on here? I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? So back up to the top of the screen here. Okay, so step number 2 there, you can watch a podcast I did with my friend, Dr. Anthony J, and you should be able to see it there or somewhere. And it shows you the big problem we have with these estrogenic endocrine disrupting chemicals. I've also got some more information below on another video that puts it all together for you. Now, what I want to finish on are these omega-6 to 3 because they are a big problem. The slave diet increases your omega-6 up high. The slave diet, there's a lot of omega-6 and there's very little omega-3, and that's a big problem. I'll just show you two research papers. This one here, quite profound. Excessive amounts of omega-6 promotes the pathogenesis of many diseases, including cardiovascular disease, cancer, inflammatory and autoimmune diseases. Now, where I've got this highlighted in green, a ratio of 4:1 was associated with a 70% decrease in total mortality. So that is profound. A 2.5:1 ratio helps protect you from cancer, whereas a 4:1 ratio had no effect. So you can see that we need to get it back to at least a 2.5:1, or ideally where the scientists say it needs to be, a 1:1 ratio, where we evolved to, where this is how we evolved. Now this part here, a ratio of 2 or 3:1 suppresses inflammation in patients with arthritis. Now, I had arthritis, and 5 shoulder surgeries with my garbage genetics. Now, I had asthma too. A ratio of 5:1 had benefits with patients with asthma, whereas a 10:1 had adverse consequences. So, as you can see, it's a big problem. And just briefly touching on these endocrine disrupting chemicals, they drive insulin resistance. So we talked about AGEs before, so we have to eliminate them. And as I talked about my fat transfer obesity gene, I would have ended up like this gentleman if I didn't have a hunger for life and really want to learn how to stay lean and healthy, because I think the main reason for that, luckily for me, is that I was a very anxious person in my late 20s and 30s, and I just wanted to feel alive again. I wanted to take life on, but I didn't know how to do it. It's been a long journey, but as you can see, food is extremely important, especially for people with garbage genetics. People with average genetics, they do okay. They get to 30 and things start to go down. They're just born into this dogma bullshit, and it's so easy to move in the opposite direction. But again, people with elite genetics, they just seem to kick ass. But unfortunately, if you're like me, you really need to do everything you can to stay pulling down on all these levers of performance. Now, the most profound thing that I can tell you is this: when you feel good, it becomes a lifestyle very quickly. And in 2018, when I pulled down on these levers, I came back online within 7 days. My energy was started to be constant. That low-level anxiety was gone. And it was all because I pulled down hard on the lever of ketosis. Now, the reason for that is that being in a state of nutritional ketosis it stops all this inflammation and gives you a chance to start to heal and move your omega-6 to 3 ratio back to where we evolved at a 1:1 ratio, and that's where mine is now. Now, there's a very simple test that you can buy online. They mail it to you. You prick your finger, you put it on a swab, you send it back, they email you the results, and you know where to go. Now, just to wrap this one, I'll show you how to do all that too. Just to wrap that up, here's another research paper, right? It drives constant low-grade inflammation. It decreases serotonin. It increases cortisol production. It changes your dopaminergic system so you become more impulsive, more emotional. Does it sound familiar? That's exactly what was happening to me. So to bring it all home, the very first thing we need to do is switch to the Emperor diet. I've got more information about how you can do that below. We have to eliminate these endocrine disrupting chemicals, and you can have a look at that podcast I did with my friend and mentor, Dr. Anthony J, PhD. Should be here somewhere. And I've got more information about how you can change your omega-6 to 3 ratio. Now, if you've liked this, if you've found this useful and helpful, give it a thumbs up here on YouTube. Comment below because it really helps me reach more people with this profound, life-changing message. I'm on a mission to change lives. This is the Mark Guyon method, and this is the Mark Guyon wrap. And, it's time to stand up and take our power back, don't you think? Because even if you've got garbage genetics like me, you can mimic elite genetics. And again, there's that podcast with Dr. Anthony and I that Dr. Anthony and I did last week. I'm putting it out in about 2 days, so look out for that one. Make sure you got notifications turned on because you don't want to miss this one. It shows you how easy it is if you've got garbage genetics to mimic elite and good genetics. And that's what we want. We want to wake up in the morning when our feet hit the floor. We want to have energy. We want our hormones up here. We want stress optimized. We want inflammation where it needs to be. So there it is. That's the Mark Guyon method. This is the Mark Guyon wrap. And performance is all about nutrition and manipulating your hormones and genes to work for you, designing a life for you.